If we have that freedom to think bigger and say, okay, how do we get to grow this pie and create wealth and create generational wealth? Like, that's what excites me nowadays.
It's just something that I live. It's just something that I live. Hey, hey, hey. It's just something that I live that this world don't live. It's just something that I feel that this world don't feel. I gotta keep it real. J.E. Get him.
Welcome to the Let Bob podcast. It's your boy Ant, the CEO, founder of Let Bob. Dave's not with me today, but it's cool because we got a great guest. I think you guys will be excited to hear about this gentleman and everything he has going on. Remember, we do this podcast to reference our 4 pillars, which is finance, ownership, community, and education. By the way, if you hadn't downloaded our app, please hit the App Store or the Google Play Store, type in Let Bob, let space B-O-B, and get to ownership today. So our guest for today, Mr. Leron Rogers. He's a partner at Fox Rothschild. He's a business attorney. His clients are some of the best in the business too. Specifically speaking about one of my favorite artists, Mr. Rick Ross. So I'm excited to talk to him, just understand how he got into business, kind of some of the approaches he takes when he's negotiating contracts and just guiding his clients through the best financial approach to build the generational wealth that Bob is all about. So, Mr. Rogers, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem at all, man. We're excited to have someone like you on a podcast, man. It's always good to see a brother doing well and operating in excellence in his space. And so I was reading up about you, watched a couple of videos and a couple of interviews, and just very impressed with just how you maneuver through the business. We have something in common. We both have a finance background, but we're focusing on a different profession, right?
Yeah.
And so I like the way you've used that background to kind of guide your clients and position them in different ways and thinking about how they approach the business of entertainment and sports. I thought that was really cool.
I like how you say that. Really, it's really the business of entertainment and sports, and that's the proper way to position it. Yep.
Yeah, no, and listening to you, I think a lot like you in that approach, right? I wish that, that was an opportunity for these athletes and these entertainers to establish themselves as corporations legally and operate in the business. But I know we're not there yet. I'm hopeful that we see that in my lifetime. We would like to know, how did you get into space? Like, what led you, and like, what was the inspiration to get into, practicing as an attorney, and then specifically in the entertainment space?
Sure. So, my background kind of derives from, I played college baseball. I was drafted out of high school by the Atlanta Braves. Went on to school. Didn't go to the minors right away. Went to school. My junior year, I got hurt. I hurt my rotator cuff. As a baseball player, it's that's pretty much it then, right? So, I went ahead, got my finance degree. Came out of undergrad. I was a financial analyst for a couple of years, but I knew I wanted to be a sports agent. That was kind of my thing. One of my mentors said to get a couple of years of real life experience. At the time, I didn't really understand why or what that would do or help. But I did. I went, I was a financial analyst for several years at Nations Bank, in their commercial lending department. And so, I really got to understand real economics, like what these financial institutions look at and how they evaluate businesses, cash flow, profitability, how they evaluate business owners and your team. And at the time, to be honest with you, I didn't understand or appreciate how valuable that would be later in my career. So then fast forward, after doing that for 3 years, went to law school. My second year of law school, I convinced a sports agent to let me work with him. And my third year law school, signed the 33rd pick in the NFL draft as my first client. Wow. And so I was off and running being a sports agent. While in law school, graduated from law school, moved back to Atlanta, working at a big law firm during the day as a low-level grunt associate, learning how to practice law. And on the weekends, I'm flying around the country, meeting with players and, being a full-time sports agent. So, I did the sports agency thing for about 7 years. And, during that time period, I had changed law firms to a smaller boutique firm, and one of the partners did music. And so I had athlete clients, he had music clients. And so I learned how to do music contracts and whatnot, and represent entertainers at a high level. And, I realized that, after a number of years running around recruiting athletes, I was like, the music business and the entertainment business, the clients come to me. They come to my office. They call me. I don't have to, travel all around the country. I don't have to be away from my kids and family every weekend from August to, January. And so I just started focusing more on the entertainment side of things, but never lost my relationships in the sports space. So I really am one of the rare true entertainment and sports lawyers. I have relationships and I represent both entertainers and athletes as essentially their outside counsel, handling, most of their business. And I don't do any negotiations for the athletes in terms of their contracts. I let their agents do that, but I'm involved in the process in terms of just kind of a second look, an advisor, so to speak, and then handle all the off-field stuff.
No, that's a significant role. At Bob, we have attorneys.
Yes, as you should.
Hey, look, and you all do well. Our patent attorney, especially, he's a very important role in what we're doing because of the type of business we're in, right? And so, in entertainment and as an athlete, I've always been an advocate of having representation for what you don't know, right?
Right.
Again, things I like when I was listening to you, this collaboratory mindset that you have, building that team approach, not being ashamed of what you don't know, but being smart enough to hire someone or get someone on your team, to assist you in those areas that you don't just necessarily have to know. Things like negotiating a contract. As an athlete, that's probably something that you probably never do, by the time it's necessary for you to actually have to do it. And so the role you play is just significant, and the mindset you have, I think, is why you've had such success in the space, I would imagine. Well, let me ask you this. As a former banker, when you're looking at some of the decisions that your clients are making, does your background I guess play a significant role in how you advise them as far as the decision they should make in the case of maybe royalties, or to your point, maybe you're not negotiating their actual contract, but you are reading over and I guess advising them on what they should do if they were to get the best situation?
Yeah, I mean, my background in finance obviously plays a role, because most lawyers really don't understand finance. They don't understand cash flow, discounted cash flow, time value of money, any of those kinds of things. So, when we're talking about, in the terms of athletes, we're talking about deferred compensation. I'm always like, well, let's find out what the present value of that dollar is and when you're going to get it, so we can really figure out so we can compare apples to apples, right? Yeah. Because a lot of times what teams do, this gets done in the entertainment space as well. They'll say, oh, we'll give you X millions of dollars in 2 years or 3 years. And so I need to be able to, or we'll give you some money now, right? So I need to be able to translate that and understand, and have it explain to the client, what is the value of that dollar today versus the value of that dollar in 2 or 3 years, right? What are the risks if we defer that income? And sometimes there's a valid reason to defer income. Sometimes you want to flip it to the next calendar year or another calendar year for tax reasons. There's all kinds of reasons to do that. And sometimes it doesn't make sense, based on the discounted value and all that other things. But most lawyers don't even understand that. They're just like, oh, I'm going to get you more money, but you don't get it for 2 years. Well, hell, that may not make any sense. But if you don't understand finance and discounted cash flow, you would have no ability to really explain why that doesn't make sense to a client.
Do you think also the fact that you are an African-American male and you have a similar background from, or as the people you're representing in a lot of cases, do you think that you're more biased to see the well-being of them versus trying to just get a check,
Sure.
right?
I mean, the thing, reason why I got into the sports agency business is because I, like many people, were just sick and tired of seeing, brothers, messing up their life, right? And so, I've always said I'm gonna be, whether I'm a lawyer, I'm a friend, an advisor, I'm always gonna shoot it to you straight, right?
Yeah.
All my clients, they know I'm just a straight shooter. I'm gonna cuss them out if they're doing wrong or if they're messing up their life. I've had to put clients in rehab before.
Wow.
I've gotten fired for doing the right thing because they were mad at me only, years later to come back and apologize and say I was the only one who kept it 100 with them. The good thing is I can sleep at night. I'm fine. My kids are all out the house. They're in college or graduated. Like, I'm cool. I can, and when you're in that space, in that headspace, it's a beautiful thing because I don't need anything from any client. I can, at this point, I don't have to take any more clients. I'm cool. But to be able to have that freedom to think bigger and say, okay, how do we get to grow this pie and create wealth and create generational wealth? Like, that's what excites me nowadays. That's where I'm trying to be. I'm 51 years old. Like, I'm in that time span where I'm just really trying to change the world. Really, just to be honest with you, I'm really trying to change the world.
I think that's what happens, though, right? So I think after, you set goals as a young man, of course, and most of those goals are aligned with some monetary payoff, right? And then when you get to the money, you realize, well, money is, it's okay, right? It provides you, different means, right? It's a great tool.
Don't get it twisted. Money's good, don't.
Yeah, it's a good tool.
I'm from the hood. Like, if you never had money, you appreciate having some bread now.
yeah, it's a great tool, but it's definitely not the best, right? It's not the only thing, right?
It's not the only thing. No, it doesn't bring you happiness, at least not personally. There's other stuff that brings you true joy and purpose in life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that's what we see as we climb to the journey of achieving those goals and those monetary results starts to happen. You start to have a shift in mentality, like you're saying. It starts to be less about me and how much money I can accumulate, and more about, like, how can I change some of these real problems, right? How can I build a network of resources to impact the community past what my money can do, right? And so that's the interesting thing we're seeing now in the environment since the George Floyd incident a few years ago. You're seeing more of us really come together and ask that question of how can we collaborate and you combine our resources, some monetary resources. But I think the most important that you're seeing is the network, the resources of networking. That's really becoming a thing. That would lead me to a new question, though. So with the landscape of entertainment and sports changing in the way that it is, right? You have college athletes, now they can get paid through the NIL deals. You have social media that's just took things to an entire different space. And so being an entertainment attorney, how does that impact how you're able to talk to your clients or potential clients about delayed gratification? Because all of these things are instant gratification. And so it kind of challenges this idea of work hard, now and get the big payoff later. And so how do you deal with that? How do you maneuver in that space when things have become so instant now?
Well, okay, so you sit down early on and you have a plan, right? So, and the plan is not much different for entertainers and athletes because we treat both as a brand. So you sit down, you say, okay, where are we trying to get to? So for a musician, they're trying to get, let's say, a recording agreement, right? So how do you do that? You have to get the eyeballs and attention of a community such that then a record label will want to do business with you, right? And so, we're in the content business. And I'm very clear with athletes and entertainers, you're still, even if you're an athlete, an athlete, the only difference between an athlete and an entertainer is an athlete has to be good at their particular sport first. Like, you have to be a baller.
Yes.
The music business, the music has to be good, but even more so, you have to have eyeballs on you. And I'll be real with you. There's been some music that I'm like, I don't know if this is good or bad, but a lot of people like it and music labels want to pay for it. We're going to do the deal, right? Yeah. So it's not always just about the quality of music. Sometimes it's just about the following and the energy, and so once you understand what the end goal is, which is eyeballs, then how do you get there? And that's through digital, like you said, the online, social media, digital marketing. How do you build an audience? How do you connect one fan at a time? Don't think about how to get to 1 million. How do we get to 100? Then how do we get to 1,000? Then how do we get to 10,000? You just build like that. And if you think like that and very methodically, and that's how I think, that's how we work through the process. And then once you have the eyeballs, then how do we monetize those eyeballs? How do we do brand deals? How do we, start off small? How do we get those deals? And then how do we get equity as we get bigger and we have accumulated millions of engaged fans? So that's just, it's really the same process. But it just little differences with respect to entertainers and athletes, but basically the same brand building process.
And so I want to highlight that so our audience can hear that nothing is instant, right? Everything that you're saying,
very rare to have instant success, right?
Yeah. And even if you have instant success, it's still time that's necessary to maintain that success, right? So we want the audience to hear that, Leron didn't just become one of the best in the industry just overnight. You could see the way he thinks is the reason why he's getting the results that he's getting. And so for us, we are, as a business, as a brand, and as a movement, about shifting the way you think. We're trying to shift to an owner's mentality. And everything you're saying is how owners think. Correct. They're not just thinking about today. They're thinking about tomorrow, next year, the year after that, 100 years later. They're so far ahead, and they're strategically plotting and planning with their product or their brand. And as a culture, we definitely have to see more people like you and see the results that you're getting and pay attention and listen and try to, replicate what you're doing. So one of the biggest reasons we started a podcast is because you could see more now on YouTube. You can see more articles out there. You got social media, but it's still different when you can just talk and try to hear the principal thoughts of someone who's very impactful in a specific space and changing lives. Sure. So for us, we're definitely excited to get to talk to you. One last question before we wrap this up.
Oh, we can keep this going, man. I love it. This is what I love talking about.
Oh, okay. Well, hey, I'm game if you game. So one question for you though, because we got to talk about this space. So letbob, our robo-advisor app, one of the first in the business where, our app, it actually makes the stock selections for you and perform the trading, right? We did it that way to remove the barriers that generally keep people who look like you and me out of it, right? Most times, for me at least, I didn't get exposed to the stock market till I was, in my 30s, especially learning how to trade and all that stuff. And I found, even with my background, I'm a software engineer over the last 15 years and finance as well, some of the highest levels of industry you can practice in, but playing the stock market was still terribly challenging for me, right? And so with our app, we tried to remove those barriers to give people, your everyday guy, an opportunity to have ownership in individual stocks themselves. Not this whole ETF deal, that's great, that's good, but ownership in the actual stock is what's generational, right? And so we're curious, I know you're in the market because you got a finance degree, but when you got into it and when you were introduced, was there reservation about it, or what made it a good thing or a bad thing in your mindset to participate in the stock market?
Well, first of all, congratulations on the app. I'm definitely want to get some more information on it because I think that's a very valuable tool that can be used in the community. And I would just love to understand what the AI, in terms of you picking the stocks and all that stuff, and get, kind of dig into the weeds. I want to follow with you on that for sure. Okay. And then just based on my personal, when I was in undergrad and just learning finance, I was around here, telling my family, hey, you got to, diversify and put your money in, you got to invest on a regular basis and don't worry about the dips and the ups and downs, just, dollar cost averaging. I was all a big proponent of it because I never talked about any of that with my family, my dad, my mom. I didn't know anything about, how do you get to retirement and all that stuff, right? So I felt like an evangelist. I'm out here trying to, tell the people, like, it's not that hard. All you got to do is put a little bit of money away when you're young and keep it going, right?
Yeah.
So I never had a fear of the stock market, and I always understood what it was, right? And really, if you really understand the market, you understand the best thing that can happen to you is that there's ebbs and flows in the market, right? Because stagnation, there's nothing you can do with a stagnant market. So I love when there's a dip in the market because there's opportunity, right? Like I'm the contrarian, and I do the same thing like in the crypto space. If you really understand things, then you'll understand value when there's a dip in the market, because there's a herd mentality in the stock market, right? So when people think stuff is going to go down, it goes down, right? But if you think there's real value there, then that's when you're contrarian. That's when we buy. Like, I love the dip. If there's a recession, I'm like, that means everything's going to be on sale, right? If you're prepared for it and you have cash to take advantage of the opportunity, then that's where you come up. But if you get scared and you follow the herd and you sell, then there's no upside for you. So, if you really understand the market, it's not that hard to be successful in it long term. Like, I don't really bet on the stock market. I just play the long game, and and everything has its place, right? So you have insurance, you have mutual funds, individual stocks. Like, everything has its place, and you have to individualize your own. I'm not a financial advisor, but see your financial advisor. I want to make sure people aren't thinking I'm giving the financial advice, but in general, everybody has their own risk tolerance, right? I mean, as I've gotten older, I invest more in venture capital and private equity, because I have all the other basics down, right? But you shouldn't be 25 years old and just jump straight into private equity and everything until you have your 401k and your savings and all the structure to your house built, so to speak. So yeah, I mean, if you're educated about it, then it's not too daunting at all.
Yeah, and so that's kind of the challenge, right? So you hear your journey, and you do have the education, right? You did take the time to understand the pros and the cons and build a strategy around how you're going to participate. But what we see and what we've seen is just the training is not there, right? So to your point, you were one of the only ones in your family trying to, get everybody else to invest in this thing. Because when you were reading like all these people who did invest in this thing have done so well over time, right? And so you want to get everybody excited. And for us as a business, that's where we are, right? We know, the stock market traditionally over the last 100 years have traditionally trended up. And so with that, there's a high probability it will continue to do so. And so we are, as a culture, not invested. We're not in the stock market, right? We're not individually getting knowledgeable and participating, right? By way of 401ks and retirement plans, we are. But outside of that, as a community, we're not participating. And so for us as a brand, we want to make sure we get as many people who look like us invest in the stock market. We know that this is how you build wealth, this is how you retain wealth, and this is how you leave a legacy behind, right? And so to hear someone like you heavily involved and heavily in tune with it just verifies what we tell our audience all the time. Anybody who has success is aligned with the market. That's just how it's going to be.
Generally, yeah.
Market changes everything, right? It controls everything. If the stock market tanks, it affects all industries in some way, form, or fashion. So, it behooves us all to be knowledgeable in the space.
Yeah, and you know what? You bring up a good point, and it's not necessarily black, white, or color thing. It's really socioeconomic, right?
Yeah.
So, as Black and brown people, we've just been slower or not slower. I mean, we've had more hurdles in order to get to the socioeconomic level where we can start seeing and understanding, right? Because I think we all know once we're on an equal playing field, we kill it. We perform everyone in business, sports, no matter what it is, if there's a level playing field, we generally outperform.
Yeah.
So, we have to educate, like you said, we got to educate the community, because then we can create, my dream is to create a middle class of wealthy Black people,
Oh yeah, I'm
right?
with you.
Because it's only then that we can fund our own startup technology companies. We don't have to go to Silicon Valley. We can pass the hat amongst our circle of friends. I want to be able to, I can now, but I want to be able to do it more, pick up the phone and say, hey, I see a company here, why don't we all put 100,000 in, and we're gonna put this is the angel round, let's raise $1 million, right? So that's the conversations that I'm excited about doing and having. But you're right, you can't do that until you've built your base. And part of that base for most people is a diversified stock portfolio.
Yeah. Yeah, no, as a startup, as a Black-owned startup, right? It's challenging. It's been very challenging. The journey has been way different. If we were white with the products we have, much different story. Just being honest. Like we have an ETF on the stock exchange as well. I don't know if I mentioned that.
Okay.
That's done really well this year. But being a Black-owned company, it's different when you're raising money. You have to be, 10 times as good to have the credit in all spaces that we deal with, right? We have 25 million on the management with our ETF, and we still get challenged, and we're outperforming. We have the AI tech that's powering our ETF is the same tech that's powering our robo-advisor, and there's nothing else in the industry like it, right? And so for us as a startup, as a Black business in tech and in finance, we are just faced with challenges left to right. And those lack of resources and lack of capital, we can tell you it causes a lot of friction for you when you're trying.
It's difficult. There's a real issue with minority owned tech and startups getting funding. And I'm not going to necessarily say there's some manifest goal for these white companies or investors not to do business with Black people. You know what it is? People do business with people they like, and they have things in common with, and that they feel comfortable with, right? And so it's natural if I go to a mixer and there's mostly white people and there's 5 brown people, I might gravitate and say, what's up to the brown people first, right?
Yep.
Right. But as you have to understand that, right, as a brown or a minority startup, and that really gets to why I want to create when I say middle class of wealthy people, not middle class in terms of America, but middle class of wealthy brown people. Yes. Because when you go, I want to be able to go in that room and people are going to automatically connect with you and your story from just an organic and a background standpoint, because I'm naturally going to feel more comfortable with you, right? Just because we're probably going to vibe differently, right? Yep. And so, that's what we really have to be striving towards for the next generation, right? Not my generation. I'm already done. I'm old, right? But I want to change that narrative. And I think there's a real excitement and opportunity for the young creatives and the content creators and the tech startups, to do that. And then, they have to really empower each other so that they can have a whole nother generation come up behind them. And so that's, I'm with you 100%, and I understand the struggle, and that's what gives me passion, to change that narrative.
No, I agree. It was my goal when I started this thing. I want to be a representation of what you could do with your mind, leveraging technology, right? I'm always an advocate of Black and brown people learning how to code. It's just a space that's lucrative. It's a space that if you know how to do it, it's a skill that if you have it, you never have to worry about, employment.
You're always in demand.
Lifetime. You're always in demand, right? But it's not in what they've seen traditionally, it's not cool. So we try to make it at Bob cool. we want you to look and we want it to be a brand where it looks and feel like you, right? We don't want to go into the schools. When I first started, I would go into the schools. I have on my suits, talking about teaching the kids how to code, tell them about how much money they can make. And I wasn't really meeting them where they were, right? It was like, who is this guy? I've never seen a coder. You know, most of them had never seen a software person, you know, and it would just be so challenging. But now I approach it with t-shirts, baseball caps, just keep the conversation just where they can understand it and try to make tech cool. Make finance cool, because we are people, we like visual and we like to see evidence. And so for me, that's where my passion is, to change that kid who, you know, he wants to play sports, but he doesn't have the height or the speed. But he gets that technology is an opportunity for him where he has 100% probability of success. So I always love talking to a brother who's doing something, who's, you know, exceeding anything in this industry that's set in front of him. And so to hear your story and to talk to you is just exciting. And, you know, you're what Bob is about. You know, it stands for Black owned business. And to see Black excellence is always great for the brand and to show to our audience that, you know, we are out here. No matter what the television show you.
We out here.
Yeah, we out here and we getting it. So nah, man, really appreciate you for your time. To the Let Bob audience, please, again, if you haven't downloaded our app, go to the Google Play Store, the App Store, type in let space BOB, download it today, start your pathway to ownership in the stocks, and we'll check you. Thank you, Leron, for being on.
No, thank you. I appreciate you for your time, for your audience. All my socials are at Leron Rogers, Leron Rogers. Hit me up. Let's connect and, you know, let's build together.
Let's do it. Thanks, man.
All right. Pleasure.
Get 'em.